Lynn had never considered herself particularly lucky. She often joked that if bad luck were a contest, she'd win first place every time. As she ambled through the sun-dappled paths of Fairview Park, a half-eaten ice cream cone clutched in one hand, she couldn't help but feel that today was no exception. The ice cream had melted in a rather tragic way, dribbling down her fingers and leaving a sticky trail behind. "Just my luck," she muttered, trying to wipe her hands on her already questionable shirt. The day was meant to be a picnic with her friends, an attempt to shake off the existential dread that came with being in her late 20s and still living in her childhood bedroom. Her friends had wanted to relax, enjoy the weather, and not think about the fact that life hadn't exactly turned out the way they planned. But here she was, with a sticky shirt and a half-hearted treasure hunt in mind, hoping to impress Tyler, the cute guy from her art class. "Hey, Lynn," shouted her friend Mia, waving her arms wildly like a windmill. "You better find something good. Or else Tyler might just think you're, well, a lost cause." The others laughed, and Lynn felt her cheeks flush. "Lost cause? I'll show you lost cause," she called back, raising her chin defiantly. As she turned away, Lynn spotted something glinting in the grass nearby. "What's that?" she wondered aloud, curiosity piqued. She ambled over, dodging a group of kids playing tag, and bent down to examine the shiny object. There, half buried in the soil, was an ornate scythe, its blade shimmering in the sunlight, like something straight out of a Halloween shop. "Whoa!" she exclaimed, adrenaline kicking in. "This could be worth something." She glanced back at her friends, who were now watching her with raised eyebrows. "Is that a scythe?" Tyler asked, clearly intrigued, as he jogged over. "Are you really digging in the dirt for treasure?" "Of course not. I'm, just inspecting nature," Lynn retorted, trying to sound nonchalant. She gave the scythe a good tug, and surprisingly, it came out easily. "See? Nature is full of surprises." Her friends looked at her with a mix of skepticism and amusement. "I think you've just found the world's worst garden tool," Mia snickered. "Maybe it's cursed," Tyler joked, pretending to shiver. Lynn laughed it off, but as she held the scythe, she felt an odd energy radiate from it, a sensation she couldn't quite place. That night, Lynn tossed and turned in bed, the scythe propped against her wall, looking far too out of place among her collection of stuffed animals and an assortment of questionable art supplies. She had planned to forget about it, but the moment her head hit the pillow, she was pulled into a dream that was anything but ordinary. The dream began in a swirling mist that coiled around her like a thick blanket. She stood in a field that stretched endlessly, dotted with odd-looking trees that seemed to sway without wind. The sky was an ominous shade of purple, and the air buzzed with an electric tension. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the fog, a ghostly figure wearing an expression of irritation. It was Mr. Wraith, complete with a frayed suit and a monocle that looked like it belonged to a Victorian gentleman. "Ah, finally! Someone with a little sense," he exclaimed, rolling his eyes. "I was beginning to think I'd be stuck here forever." Lynn blinked, still grappling with the absurdity of the situation. "Who are you? And why are you in my dream?" "I'm Mr. Wraith, guardian of the scythe you so carelessly dug up," he said, waving a spectral hand dismissively. "And you, dear Lynn, are in quite the predicament. That lovely piece of metal you found is a cursed artifact. It reaps souls and haunts its owner with nightmarish dreams. Congratulations." Lynn was taken aback, her brain struggling to process his words. "Cursed? What do you mean cursed?" Mr. Wraith sighed, floating a few inches off the ground in exasperation. "Each night you'll find yourself in increasingly bizarre dreams, filled with souls I've, well, helped along. And believe me, they're not thrilled about it." "Sounds like a party," Lynn muttered sarcastically, but there was an unsettling thrill racing through her veins. "Don't get too comfortable," he continued, a smirk creeping across his face. "You'll be dealing with their regrets, and trust me, they don't take kindly to being disturbed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a backstory to haunt. And just like that, Lynn woke up, the morning sun spilling through her curtains. She blinked at the ceiling, half convinced she had imagined the whole encounter. The scythe gleamed ominously in the corner, casting a long shadow across her room. The next few nights were a blur of restless sleep and bizarre dreams. Lynn encountered a parade of ghosts, each more ridiculous than the last. There was Gertie, the overly dramatic Victorian lady who had never learned how to bake, lamenting her failed soufflé with such fervor that Lynn half expected her to start flinging phantom flour around the dreamscape. Then there was Carl, a balding businessman who spent his afterlife lamenting his decision to invest in a failed line of smart, pet rocks. They said it was the next big thing, he would wail, flailing his ghostly arms. Lynn tried to help them, of course, even as the absurdity of it all left her chuckling. Maybe try something else, she suggested to Carl. How about a cat cafe? Those are all the rage. Carl's response was a long, echoing groan that filled the misty expanse around them. As the days turned into weeks, Lynn found herself grappling with the dreams more than her waking life. She had tried to explain her situation to her friends, but they just laughed, convinced that Lynn was pulling one of her classic pranks. "I swear, you're just trying to make Tyler think you're interesting," Mia teased, elbowing her playfully. "Really, it's a cursed scythe." Lynn insisted, though she could tell even she didn't quite believe it anymore. "And these ghosts, they're all just so weird." But as she said those words, the air in the cafe grew cold, and a shadow passed over their table. Lynn turned to find herself face to face with the Reaper, his presence looming like a thundercloud ready to burst. "What's happening?" she gasped, her heart racing. The scythe felt heavier on her back than ever, and she could almost hear it whispering for her to pay attention. "Time to reap what you've sown," he growled, and the cafe was suddenly filled with howls and wails, the spirits she had encountered swirling around her in a furious tempest. And just like that, the dream world collided with reality, sending Lynn spiraling into chaos. The chaos in the cafe escalated as Lynn found herself surrounded by a swirling maelstrom of souls, each one crying out for attention. The Reaper stood ominously at the edge of the storm, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips as if he were relishing the chaos. Lynn's heart pounded like a drum, and she felt the weight of the scythe against her back, heavy and unyielding, as if it were a living thing, urging her to act. "Hey! Cut it out," she shouted, trying to be heard over the cacophony of ghostly wails. "This isn't helping anyone." Her voice wavered, but desperation lent it strength. "Gertie! Carl! Anyone! You've got to help me." At her words, the ghosts momentarily halted, staring at her with wide, luminous eyes. It was as if Lynn had pressed a pause button on their ethereal despair. "Help you?" Gertie exclaimed, her Victorian dress billowing as she floated closer. "Help you? We're the ones needing help. I never got to host my tea party. And I never got to sell my rocks." Carl added, wringing his hands in a comically exaggerated manner. "Guys, focus!" Lynn yelled, feeling like she was directing a chaotic play gone awry. "We need to find a way to get rid of the Reaper before he makes a really bad decision." The Reaper stepped forward, his cloak billowing like storm clouds. "You think you can just waltz around in your little dreams and escape your fate?" he taunted, pointing a skeletal finger at her. "I am the harbinger of endings. You can't avoid me forever." Lynn felt a spark of rebellion ignite within her. "You're not the only one with power here," she shot back, pointing to the scythe. "I have this thing. And I'm going to make it work for me." The Reaper raised an eyebrow, intrigued but not quite convinced. "Very well, show me what you've got, child." With her heart racing, Lynn took a deep breath and closed her eyes, focusing on the scythe. It was an odd sensation, like holding a live wire, thrumming with energy and yet oddly comforting. "Okay, everyone, we need to team up," she said, her voice rising over the murmurs of uncertainty. Gertie, you're dramatic. Use that to distract him. Carl, you have regrets. Use them to bait him. What do you mean? Carl asked, tilting his head, his expression confused. Remember how you said you wanted to sell pet rocks? Lynn prompted, her mind racing. What if we create an illusion of a rock store, and you lure him in with that? Brilliant! Gertie exclaimed, her spirit reignited. I'll help. Let's do this. Carl agreed, puffing out his chest, though it was an empty gesture. As Lynn concentrated, she felt the power of the scythe surge. The air thickened with possibility, and she envisioned a bustling rock store, complete with gaudy signs advertising the next big thing in pet care. A flash of light erupted around them, transforming the cafe into an absurd marketplace. The Reaper blinked in surprise, momentarily distracted by the colorful display. What is this nonsense? He demanded, stepping into the makeshift store. Welcome to Carl's Pet Rock Emporium. Lynn called out, channeling her inner salesperson. We've got rocks of all shapes and sizes. Don't you want to buy one? The Reaper hesitated, glancing around at the colorful assortment of rocks and the eager souls trying to sell them. You think I'm going to fall for this? He scoffed, but his interest was piqued. Come on. You've never seen anything like this before. Carl shouted, his ghostly form shimmering with excitement. You'll be the envy of all the other Reapers. For a moment, Lynn held her breath. Would this actually work? The Reaper's gaze flicked between the ridiculous setup and the eager ghosts, and she could see the wheels turning in his head. Perhaps, he said slowly, his demeanor softening, but I don't see a price tag on any of these intriguing items. Price? Only a soul, of course. Gertie chimed in, fluttering her hands dramatically. Lynn seized the moment. That's right. Just think of it as an investment. You take a rock, and you get a lifetime supply of regret-free living. The Reaper seemed to mull it over, his curiosity getting the better of him. Regret-free living, you say? Yes. Lynn shouted, her voice filled with newfound determination. You'll never have to worry about souls again if you just take one of Carl's fantastic rocks. As the Reaper stepped deeper into the illusion, Lynn took a breath, feeling a strange sense of unity with the ghosts around her. They were all part of this moment, sharing the thrill of the ridiculousness they had created. Okay, the Reaper said finally, crossing his arms. Let's say I buy one of your pet rocks. What do I get in return? Freedom from your burdens. Lynn exclaimed, feeling the energy of the scythe radiating warmth. You could live like a ghost without worrying about the souls you take. Just think, no more haunting. You could do anything you want. The Reaper's eyes gleamed with a flicker of interest. Anything? Absolutely. Lynn replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. You could travel, explore the universe, be free. With a dramatic flourish, Carl picked up a particularly gaudy rock and presented it to the Reaper. This one is our best seller. Guaranteed to bring you good fortune. The Reaper examined the rock, tilting his head, and Lynn could almost see the gears turning in his mind. I suppose I could use a change of scenery, he mused, considering the absurdity of the situation. Think of it as a retirement plan. Lynn continued, seeing her chance. You've done your time reaping souls. Why not enjoy the perks of your labor? Retirement, you say? The Reaper's voice held a tone of curiosity mixed with uncertainty. Lynn nodded vigorously, feeding off the growing momentum. Exactly. You've earned it. And just think, no more chasing down unwilling souls. As the chaos of their surroundings began to fade, replaced by the whims of Lin's imagination, the Reaper found himself surrounded by the absurdity of it all. Finally, he leaned closer, inspecting the rock with a critical eye. "Very well, I shall take it," he declared dramatically. "But only because I'm curious." Lin felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Fantastic choice," she exclaimed, as she motioned for Carl to ring him up. "Will that be cash or soul?" Carl asked, a cheeky grin stretching across his spectral face. With a chuckle that echoed like a distant thunderclap, the Reaper replied, "A soul will do." He reached out, and with a dramatic flourish, he withdrew a shimmering light that materialized into a small, swirling essence, an ethereal soul that floated before Lin, delicate and luminous. "Here, take it," he said, handing it over with an air of unexpected gentility. Lin accepted the soul, feeling its warmth radiate through her hands. "Thank you," she replied, almost in disbelief. "You won't regret this." And just like that, the chaos began to unravel. The cafe returned to normal, the ghosts dissipated, and the Reaper, now with a pet rock clutched tightly in one hand, vanished into the ether, leaving Lin standing alone, breathless but exhilarated. As the morning sun peeked through her window, Lin sat up in bed, the scythe now resting silently beside her. For the first time, it felt light, like a weight had been lifted. She couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. "I can't believe that worked," she whispered to herself, determined to put her bizarre adventures behind her. Lin took the scythe and decided it was time for a more responsible ending for such an object. She'd read somewhere that ancient artifacts belonged in museums, or maybe with someone who could appreciate their history, definitely not with a clumsy dreamer like herself. That afternoon, she made her way to the local museum, the scythe carefully wrapped in a blanket. As she approached the entrance, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. A slight shiver crawled down her spine, but she brushed it off. "Just nerves," she reassured herself, pushing through the doors. Inside, the museum was quiet, the air filled with an echo of footsteps and whispers of history. Lin approached the front desk, where an elderly woman with spectacles perched on her nose looked up. "Hello. Can I help you?" the woman asked, adjusting her glasses. Yes," Lin began, unwrapping the scythe. "I found this, and I think it might be," the woman gasped, her eyes widening in shock. "Where did you find that?" "In Fairview Park," Lin replied, her heart racing. "I thought it might belong here." "Belong here? That's an ancient artifact," the woman exclaimed, her voice rising with excitement. "You must be careful. It's said to be cursed." Lin chuckled, remembering her adventures. "Oh, believe me, I know. But I managed to, negotiate with the Reaper, so I think it's safe now." The woman's eyes sparkled with intrigue. "You negotiated with the Reaper?" Sort of," Lin said, feeling a wave of embarrassment wash over her. "It was a bit of a bizarre experience, really. But I think it would be better suited here, in your care." As the woman carefully inspected the scythe, Lin felt a sense of finality wash over her. She had faced the darkness, laughed in its face, and emerged victorious. The artifact was not just a relic of death, it had become a symbol of her growth, a testament to her courage. "Thank you for bringing this to us," the woman said, her voice full of admiration. "It will be treated with the respect it deserves." Lin smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her. "No problem. Just don't let it go chasing souls again, okay?" As she stepped back into the light of day, Lynn felt lighter than air. The worries that had weighed her down seemed to dissolve in the sunlight. With a bounce in her step, she made her way home, her heart full of hope and laughter. And as she passed by Fairview Park, she couldn't help but chuckle at the memories, the ghosts, the scythe, and the absurdity of it all. Who knew a simple day at the park could lead to such a whirlwind of adventures? As she reached her house, Lynn glanced back at the park, a smile on her lips. Life might be weird, she said aloud, but at least it's never boring. In that moment, she knew she was ready to embrace whatever came next, pet rocks and all, and with that, Lynn stepped through her front door, leaving behind the past and welcoming the future with open arms, laughter dancing in the air around her.